Hey, what's up, everybody? So, yesterday I made four different videos, and two of them were good. I have other video channels that I work on. One is a kids channel, believe it or not, and the other one has to do with bodybuilding and Lee Priest. So, I was in video mode yesterday, and I got to the Steve Reeves videos, and guess what? No audio. So, I tried to go live and that's all right. Just some bugs to work out, but I'm back and I hope you are doing great. Happy holidays. So, we're going to go over some of the comments. There were some great questions in here, and sometimes it's easier just to get on here and do a video and answer the questions and share my screen with you and show you this, that, and the other. And that's what the community is for, right? The YouTube community. So, let's just jump into it. Yesterday, I posted a picture on my Instagram, and it was this one right here. And that's Steve Reeves 1976 Jag XJS. And I've been doing this for 3 years, and I've been a Steve Reeves collector for 3 years. And sometimes you think everybody, quote unquote, already knows that you have Steve's Jag, or that you have, a trophy or a piece of equipment or whatever it is. But then I find somebody says, wait a minute, you own Steve Reeves' Jag? So obviously, I haven't done good enough job getting that out there. And, the other thing is new people come on board regularly, whether it's the YouTube channel or Instagram. And some people leave. I get it. That's just the way life is. But yeah, this was me a couple of nights ago sitting out in my garage. You can see I got a glass of something. What is it? Is it apple juice? Is it apple cider? Is it something else? I don't know. But I just went out in the garage, took the car cover off the car, and sat out there and was just extremely grateful, just to look at this car. It's like a piece of art. And to think of, you know, Steve owning it, and how he and Aline, his second wife, drove up and down the California coast exploring parts of the West Coast. He owned the car from 1977 to 1999, so 22 years, and then George Helmer bought it. So here we are on the community page, and I had posted this picture of Steve's Jag. Somebody in here had asked, I believe it was Odyssey and Echo Company 4670 had asked if I own the car, and my good buddy Rudy jumped in and said yes. Scott is the lucky fella who owns the Jag. It couldn't be in better hands. He deserves it. So thank you very much for that, Rudy. I'm very fortunate. And by the way, speaking of Rudy, Rudy and I were talking a couple of days ago, and I want to get Rudy on here and do a video or a series of videos with Rudy, because he might be the only guy out there that is plugged in online and can share with us his experience of living in Joy Cretis's Muscle House by the Sea. That's right. Rudy lived at Muscle House by the Sea. And when Rudy came to California from New Jersey, originally from Brazil, George Eiferman is one of the first people that Rudy met. He has at least one autographed picture signed to Rudy, signed by George Eiferman. So Rudy lived in Muscle House. He knew Joy very, very well. He shared a ton of information, and let's get him on video here. He and I can do this together. We'll make him feel at home, and he can share his experience, and we can continue to learn more about Rudy, Joy, and Steve and that era, because every new thing that we learn about Steve Reeves and that era of bodybuilding is like another chapter to a great book that you're reading. You discover another chapter, or part two of a movie comes out and you can't wait to watch it. So that's kind of how I view this. And by the way, I want to thank Rudy for his continuing contributions to everything that I'm doing here. He sends me resources, stories, photographs, videos that I share on my Lift newsletter. Lift newsletter. I'll put a link to that below the video. Every week I have a free newsletter that goes out. And I share stories from the golden era, talking about, bodybuilding and physical culture. And I'm having a lot of fun do that. I think we're on number 18, issue 18. So I started that 18 weeks ago. I think you'll really like it if you're a fan of physical culture. So I also have to thank Barry. He's the same way. He shared a lot of resources. I'm going to name some others here real quick. Randy Maloney. Thank you, Randy. He's always sharing photos and resources. Dave Dowling. Dave Dowling is probably the foremost expert on Steve Reeves' movie career. Dave Dowling and George Helmer wrote a book on Steve Reeves' movie career. And Dave and I talked, and he agreed to months ago join me here in a video on YouTube and talk about some of Steve's movies and what went on behind the scenes. And so I know you guys and I would love that. So, Dave, I'm going to be calling you, contacting you soon. The next guy, Dave Dupree, famous bodybuilder from the 1970s. Dave Dupree worked out at Ed Yarick's gym when Steve Reeves was there. And Dave says that he knows more about Steve Reeves' training than anyone alive. Now, I could be wrong. It might be that he didn't work out when Steve Reeves was there. It might be that Dave came in after Steve Reeves had moved on to the next chapter of his life. But Dave did train at Yarick's gym. And I would love to have Dave on here and tell us more about that. Tell us about what he's doing. He's a fascinating gentleman. He's been leaving comments here in my community section on this YouTube page. And he is writing a book. So, I want to hear more about that. I would, of course, buy that book, and I'm sure some of you guys would as well. A lot of you guys. What else do we have? We got Rolf from Switzerland. Thank you, Rolf. We've got Flint Long, who is a family friend of Joe Weider and Betty Weider. Joe, of course, passed away. Betty is still very much alive and active in her early 90s. Joseph from New Jersey. Eric Moore, who is a great contributor. If you're looking at my newsletter, you'll see Eric Moore's name on a lot of the contributions, whether it be photos or links to videos that you'd probably have to spend a lot of time finding on your own. But Eric's done that work for us and has helped me flesh out the content on the Lift newsletter. So thank you, Eric Moore. George Helmer and Joe Vitale, of course. I'll be mentioning those guys. And there's others out there who have helped, and I appreciate all of you guys. Let's go back to some of the questions here. Jonathan Contreras, 633, asked, do you measure thighs midway or at the top biggest part? Well, Steve Reeves and his buddies used to measure their muscles first thing in the morning when they lived at Muscle Beach, George Eiferman, etc. And they measured cold, biceps, chest, shoulder width, waist, etc. And as far as the thighs go, my initial reaction is that, Jonathan, you would measure the midway point, cold, so before you get pumped up. And, that would be, for me, my answer. What do you guys think? So, Jonathan, thank you for that comment right here. Steve Reeves is the best. That's Black Wolf OJ3KI. I agree. Here's a good one. User KF8WB2CQ4F. I'm curious about what his hobbies may have been outside of fitness. That's a great question. So Steve was into raising horses. When he was very young, his mom, Goldie, put him on a horse, I believe, 3 years old, somewhere in there. And I don't remember the name of the family horse, but the horse would just gently walk around the pasture, and Steve would be on that horse. That horse was babysitting Steve. And so you can see where he got his horse riding skills. He was on a horse from a very, very young age. He raised Morgan horses. He and Aline were very active in that. Steve won many awards for showing his Morgan horses. I've posted at least one trophy on here on the community page. and he was a lifelong cowboy. So horses were a big part of Steve Reeves' life. In fact, he said he thought a horse was the most beautiful creature God ever created. And what's interesting, speaking of the Jaguar, a neighbor, when they first saw the Jag, when they first saw me drive it, and pull it up to my house a few years ago, the neighbor said that the car looked like a horse. And what he's talking about is the sloping neck, the flying buttresses on the back of the Jag. Dino Ferraris have flying buttresses. The Ferrari BB512, the Ferrari GTS 308, they all have flying buttresses, and there's other cars as well. So I never thought about that, but maybe that was one of the attractions for Steve to that particular car, the Jag XJS. And to the person that asked about the Jag, I did make a video or two of how Steve came to own the Jag. It's a fascinating story where the actor Rock Hudson had reserved it, and you just have to watch the video, and I think you'll find that pretty interesting. So, other hobbies. Well, he was into power walking. He was into power cycling. It wasn't unusual that people would see Steve riding his specialized stump jumper bike, which I have in my possession, 40 miles outside of Valley Center. And if you're going to ride the bike 40 miles away, guess what? You got to ride it 40 miles back. I don't know. And he was in his 50s, I believe, at the time. So he was very into riding his bike. Of course, I think of Steve as a scientist in a lot of ways, and I'll explain. He was always thinking about what worked best for him and what might work best for others. Power walking is a good example of that. He felt like running, jogging was hard on the knees, and so he was walking with his horses with a group of horse riders, and he came up with power walking while he was walking his horse because the horse was walking very fast and he had to keep up. So that's where the whole idea of power walking started. And then he added weight. He added ankle weights at one point. He added a vest, a weighted vest. And then, of course, he created the power walking dumbbells. I believe that was with partnership with Ivanko, Ivanko. And I have a couple of pairs of those. You can see that video or those pictures of the power walking dumbbells on this channel. He had his animal trainer, which I have in my possession. It is a rehab tool for the shoulders. Of course, Steve injured his shoulder during the filming of one of his movies, and he thought about it and he said, hey, if I can do this motion with resistance, and that's how the animal trainer came about. What else? He created his leg lift, knee raise, hyperextension apparatus. He made that himself. That's the piece of equipment that he trained Bo Derek on right before she started filming 10. John Derek and Steve were good friends, and the Derricks would come to Steve's ranch every once in a while to visit. And there's a very famous picture of Steve training Bo Derek on that piece of equipment. So he also welded or made little trinkets, like there was a barbell set that he made when he was in high school. And recently, I checked on the stevereeves.com site for collectibles, and I didn't find that barbell set on there, so I guess that sold not too long ago. But here are some of the other items. I don't want to get too off track, but these items are still for sale on stevereeves.com. This is George Helmer's site, not mine. And every time I look on here, every few months, it seems like the price keeps going up. And the price will continue to go up because that's just the way it works. You might have seen recently in the news that a Babe Ruth 1914 rookie card just this week sold for $7+ million. Babe Ruth, the great baseball player, a 1914 card. Google it, and you can read the story of how a 16-year-old newspaper boy bought the card. It stayed in his family. Some of the grandkids, great grandkids, whatever, played with the card because the original owner had other baseball cards. And so I guess they would pull them out of the box, maybe at the holidays or something, and play with them. Can you imagine? Kids ripping the card in two, and poof, there you go. Anyway, so the family then loaned that Babe Ruth card to a museum, and that's where the card was for the last 20 years. But just this week, that card sold for $7 million. You talk about other things like paintings, Pablo Picasso, Da Vinci, Van Gogh. Da Vinci's era was in the 1500s, and those paintings are worth millions if you can find one for sale. Physical culture is very, very young. It's only been around, um, to my mind, since the early 1900s when Eugene Sandow held the great competition. And yes, I know there were other contests prior to that, but Sandow's marketing savvy, I think Sandow is really the person who brought bodybuilding as we know it to the forefront. And so bodybuilding is really a young endeavor. Physical culture is a young activity. It's going to be, 300 years from now, a lot of this stuff, whether it's, some of Steve Reeves' collectibles, the price is just going to go up on this stuff. Just like paintings from Picasso, Da Vinci, Van Gogh, um, and the baseball cards. So I'm a big fan of investing. If you have the means, investing in this stuff because the value will continue to go up. You think of the Ming Dynasty in the 1300s and these Ming vases that sell for more millions of dollars. So physical culture is a very young activity, and if you can find something of value like Steve Reeves, what have you, I think you have a gold mine on your hands. And some of these other guys I've mentioned, like Eric Moore, he has some items. Carl, who I used to communicate with, I think Carl sold some of his stuff. But there's others that have some Steve Reeves items. Okay, so other activities. What other hobbies? Well, he was a photographer. Steve loved photography. I actually have one of his cameras, a Leica, in my collection. There's pictures that I've posted here showing Steve in other countries taking pictures with that actual camera. He also owned another big box type camera. I don't know what the name of that one was, but very valuable, and he sold that to another collector. I'm sure Steve enjoyed traveling, so that would be considered a hobby. He loved being on his ranch and just, working on his ranch and taking care of his horses. And so he was very active outside of just bodybuilding. Morgan the Pirate. Yes, Steve Reeves is the man, and more thanks, David Devine. David is always posting on my community, and I appreciate it, David. So thanks for your support here. And then Kuranu says, you need to interview him. I'd like to know more about Steve's spiritual side. All right, well, let me talk about this for a minute and we'll wrap it up. Yeah, Steve was very spiritual. I know I've talked to George Helmer and I know he believed in God. And I know when he was with Deborah, they prayed, if you read Deborah's book. Um, a lot of people think that, that book is whatever, not legitimate in some ways, but we know Deborah was with Steve. We've seen pictures of the two of them, and I'm sure that that's not something that Deborah would make up. That they prayed together. What would be the point of making that up? Other than that, when Steve Reeves lived in Muscle House, Joy Cretis, and I did a video on this channel, she gave Steve the book As a Man Thinketh, because Joy loved the book. And Steve read the book, and it really elevated his thinking. Uh, Creative visualization, the power of the mind. Joy also gave Rudy a copy of As a Man Thinketh, and she autographed it to Rudy. I believe I did a video on that here as well. Steve wrote on a weightlifting belt, which I have in my collection. On the inside of the belt, Steve wrote, "If you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it." I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea. You've probably heard that before. So, yes, he was very spiritual. He was very aware. And I think that was probably, what helped him to achieve greatness is that he used the power of the mind. He set goals and then he worked towards those goals until he reached them. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is the same way, and there's other people like that too. So that's another reason why I really like Steve Reeves, because he was a fan of As a Man Thinketh and those types of books. All right, well, there you go. A lot of comments, and I will come back and do some more of this. This has been a lot of fun. I've got a lot more coming down the pipe. As mentioned, Rudy, I hope to have him on here as a guest. Dave Dupree, same thing. Dave Dowling, same thing. More stories about Steve. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday season. And I will talk to you next time. Take care, guys.